I think the House has a very good package that if we can just get the Senate to take it up, maybe we'd be surprised. That does some of the things you're talking about doing. With regard to amnesty, one of the points that he's making that I think is a very important point. You know, we hear a lot, when we had a question about impeachment, we hear a lot about the president overstepping his bounds, passing these unilateral rules and regulations by executive order and whatnot. Most of the time, that's not what he's doing. Most of the time, what presidents do is selective enforcement. So, you know, he doesn't necessarily say, okay, we're going to extend or we're going to delay the implementation of Obamacare for employers or insurance companies for a year. What he says is, he tells his people over at the IRS, don't bother these people for an extra year. And so that's how they sort of get in under the constitutional radar, if you will, and the law. That's been going on for many, many presidents. Ronald Reagan in 1986, when they passed immigration reform back then, didn't enforce the border laws, and they haven't been enforced since. So the Senate passes a comprehensive immigration bill that puts amnesty ahead of the border, first of all, quite a ways ahead of the border. John Hoeven, our senator, took a really bad bill and made it better. And that's not unimportant, because when the House passes a bill that's closer to this bill, it's much easier, it's much easier to get it our way than it is if that hadn't happened. So first of all, he put in the safeguards, he put in the money, the personnel to better secure the border. What the House is going to do, we'll take up a series of bills, not a comprehensive bill. There's two pieces of immigration reform, legal immigration and illegal immigration. The discussion always gravitates to illegal immigration, but in North Dakota especially, we have a legal immigration challenge. I want to talk about that for a minute, because this is going to confront us. I believe immigration reform is one of those things that could come on the scene very quickly. Now, it'll look quickly. It's actually been being debated for several months, if not a couple of years, in the Judiciary Committee. But it could come up quickly as part of the negotiation. And so, on the illegal immigration side, what the House would do with regard to the border, first of all, is we have a bill called the SAFE Act. And what the SAFE Act does a couple of things. First of all, it puts a check and balance in place. In other words, you take the Hoeven Amendment and the money to build up, to put the personnel on the border and whatnot. But then the House says, but we want a third-party verification that the goals are being met. Not the president, but a third party, like the government accounting office or something like that says, yes, these goals are being met, yes, these dollars are being spent the way they're supposed to be spent, yes, the border is secure. So it's a bit of an audit. The other thing, probably the best check and balance of all in the SAFE Act is that it empowers the states to pass laws that are consistent with the federal laws and then allows them to enforce their laws. As opposed to today where our U.S. Attorney General simply sues the states for trying to enforce their laws. So instead of a hostile federal government, we become a cooperative and collaborative federal government. And so if the state of Arizona passes a law that's consistent with federal law, their sheriffs, their state police, their law enforcement get to enforce those laws with the full support of the federal government. So then let's talk about this on the illegal immigration side for a minute. The amnesty piece of it is interesting, and the Senate bill is very generous to the 11 million or so undocumented workers that are currently in the country. I am one who thinks that many on the conservative side of things have demagogued the issue to make it in a way that is not reflective of the American spirit, is not reflective of the party of Lincoln, it's not reflective of the fact that we're a country of immigrants. That's not to say I'm not concerned about amnesty. I don't support amnesty. But I think our rhetoric has been worse than our history, and worse than is warranted. That said, rather than offering amnesty as a way out of the shadows, what I think we ought to do is we ought to have some sort of a draw out of the shadows that doesn't simply dismiss the fact that they broke a law to get here, but also doesn't assume that that the law that they broke was worse than simply coming here to better themselves and better their economic situation. as a nation of immigrants. And I prefer some sort of a deferred adjudication process. In other words, you admit your guilt. We don't simply say you're not guilty. You admit your guilt. You have a sentence that is appropriate for, quote, the crime. And that is perhaps, unless you've committed other crimes, that's another whole issue. But of the 11 million, very few probably have committed other crimes. So you have a deferred sentence, if you will, or deferred adjudication. And then I think you have the productive workforce that we want, that we need, that we've enforced the laws, which we haven't been doing, but you don't simply dismiss the fact that there are people here illegally. I would hesitate to favor much of a path to citizenship, but certainly, first of all, I think it's presumptuous to think they want all citizens, but certainly they want to be legal, productive members of society, and if not, then they ought to go somewhere else. On the legal immigration side, we have some issues there too. America has by far the most generous immigration policies in the country, or in the world, and they're based largely on lottery. We only allow, only 12% of the million plus immigrants that come in per year with work visas or otherwise are coming here based on some sort of a skill set or education. 12%. In Canada, it's 60% of theirs are based on some particular skill set or education that meets the demands of their economy. Same in the United Kingdom, same in Australia, and most of Europe. So what we want to do is we want to change the formula so that more of our immigration is based on particular specific skill sets that are not being met here, and that enhance the economic opportunity for our own country. So H-1Bs, for example, are that particular piece of the law, H-1B visas. Take Microsoft. Microsoft's second largest campus in the world is in Fargo. Microsoft has 6,000 job openings unable to be filled by Americans. Now, that's an indictment on our education system, perhaps, but at the very least, we know we have 6,000 job openings that have to be met by somebody. That's just one company. So we want to increase the number of H-1B visas from 55,000 per year to 165,000 per year. On top of that, we have this little part of our immigration law that requires any foreign student that gets educated at a university or college in the United States, upon graduation has to go home and then re-qualify to come back here. And we lose a lot of people, productive folks, to our global competitors by doing that. We want to add 40,000 visas for foreign graduates of universities in the United States that meet that H-1B visa formula. Then there's some other smaller pieces with entrepreneurs and folks that have a certain amount of investment from American investors and whatnot that have patents, things like that. And we want to have the best of the best and put some of those qualifications on the legal side. The other piece of the legal side that hits us a lot, and I would say my casework, the second biggest piece, the number one case load that we have deals with veterans and veterans issues and veterans benefits. The second is immigration. And it's not just the H-1Bs, but a lot of the H-2As and the ag, seasonal agriculture workers, and we have a lot of our beekeepers. We're the number one producer of honey. A lot of our beekeepers use South African labor and others, and have a particular skill, but it's not necessarily a high skill, but it's somewhat unusual. Our custom harvesters use a lot of immigrant labor and whatnot. So we do a lot of intervention on their behalf. So that's another big piece of it. But I spoke briefly about the education piece. We also passed a bill called the Skills Act that's aimed at vocational and technical education, giving a lot more, first of all, consolidating a lot of programs and giving a lot more, again, local control and trying to match our education offerings with the economic opportunities for our students. And we can do a lot better if we're educating our students for our economy, and that'll solve a lot of the challenges. That was a lot on immigration, more than I probably wanted to do. Yes?
You're talking about Skills Act.
Yep.
One of our biggest problems in this nation right now is people getting paid for not doing their job. If I go over to your house, Mr. Cramer, and I can't fix your air conditioner, do you pay me? No, you don't. you'll call someone else, he'll fix it. So how come all our doctors that can't diagnose you right, our congressmen and our senators continue to get a hell of a wage and they can't do it? We need to quit fighting and get the job done.
Okay, well, first of all, it's a good, I agree with you, I like that. But, the same thing, at the same time, what we have the opportunity to do is, I don't know about doctors, but congressmen, at least you can fire them every 2 years if they aren't getting the job done to your satisfaction. And sometimes, if the guy comes over and spends an hour trying to fix my air conditioner and doesn't get it fixed, he still might send me a bill and I still might pay it, but your time is good.
Well, our health program though, I mean, you got doctors in Trinity alone that misdiagnose, can't fix you, send you somewhere else, and you continually get the bill. A vet, you take a dog to get it fixed, you spend thousands of dollars and it don't get fixed. How come we have to pay that, but then in another word, a blue collar worker doesn't get paid? If I don't fix your air conditioner, I'm not sending you a bill.
Well,
because I know I don't deserve that pay.
Sure.
So maybe people, if they were specialized in more what they could do, they would deserve that pay.
Sure. Well, it's an interesting point. I'm not sure it's a congressional issue, but it's an interesting, I think, cultural point. Other questions? Thoughts? You guys have been very generous. I'm just going to look here with the bullets. It's been 1 hour. That's what I promised you. That's what you promised me. No more, right? And it's an hour that goes by very quickly. I want to tell you how much this means to me. You honor me by being here, and that's not why you came, but you do anyway. And I want you to know that it honors me. But the greatest honor you give me is to be your representative in Congress. And we're not all going to always agree on everything. But one thing I hope you know about me is that one of my goals, and people who know me well know this about me, I have 2 goals. One is I want to be the most accessible politician you know. That's really important to me. Way too many people have my cell number. It drives some of my staff crazy, frankly. What do you mean you talk to so-and-so? What would you know? I read in the paper. When did that happen? I like that. That's important to me, to be accessible. The other thing for me is to be transparent. I think transparency in government is the greatest backstop to corruption there is. And you don't have to have all the checks and balances in the world if people are just transparent. So sometimes that transparency gets me in trouble. You know what I mean? Usually if it's on my heart, it comes out my mouth. That builds trust, if not agreement. You know what I'm saying? So that's sort of what I'm all about. And then with that, I want to say this. I think we had some cards here. I do a radio town hall. It's on one of the stations in Minot. It's on KFYR out of Bismarck. It's on 5 stations. Is it on a station you, is it? No, it's not here. So you have to listen to it on KFYR probably.
KCJB, 9 to 11 every Wednesday.
KCJB every Wednesday. God bless you. It is. Okay, so I'm on 5 stations. All I do is take calls for an hour. And I love it. I love it. And I try to do it every Wednesday. Now tomorrow's going to be a little tricky because I'm going to be in the airplane for half of it. But when that happens, then we schedule it another day. It's really an important hour for me. If a congressional hearing interrupts, then I try to do it. Sometimes I'll sneak in and out of the hearing. Whatever I can do to take 15, 20 phone calls. Because it helps me stay connected to you all. The other thing that I do, I want you to know this, is that, and I hope I can do this forever. People tell me I can't, but I'm going to try. I sign every letter. And so if you write to me, or you call and leave your information, or you send me an email, it may take a little while to get the letter, a little longer than others, because I sign every one. I read every name, I pray over the stack, because to me, if you take the time to write to me, I'm going to take the time to respond to you. Not an auto pen. And I may not agree, you may not even like the letter that comes back to you, but I want you to know, I see the name, and it's thousands so far, and that it allows me to keep track of sort of what people are thinking. Now, those of you that belong to credit unions, you probably filled out a postcard lately. I've gotten hundreds of them, and I've been writing letters back like crazy, signing letters. Even a postcard, a campaign like that matters to me. So, whatever else you take away, I hope you know I want to be accessible, and I want to be transparent, and you bless me by being here, and I appreciate it. Thank you. And you didn't say a thing. You came right to the front. You didn't say a thing.
Yeah.
Bye.